Hi there, friends! Welcome back to the Book Nook, the channel where we read and write together. I just got back from the Tales as Old as Time Storytelling Festival, and wow, what an amazing experience! I got to talk about incredible stories while making friends from all over the world. One of them said to me, "Caroline, you should dive deeper into other genres. There's so much to discover." I thought that was the perfect thing to do next here on my channel. Not sure what a genre is? Don't worry, we're starting that journey together today. I'm at the perfect place to explore, my local bookstore. I'm here to choose the next story for my book club. It's going to be so much fun to look at different genres, figure out what makes each one special, and choose one to dive into. Let's get started. All right, so here we are in the bookstore, surrounded by shelves packed with stories. We've got literature, history, mysteries, and thrillers, and even a children's section. All of these belong to genres, which are like categories of stories with their own styles and rules. Did you see any genres you recognize? I picked out a few stories to show you from the different sections or genres found in the bookstore. Here's a realistic fiction story. What makes a story realistic? Realistic fiction is all about things that could actually happen in real life. This one's about a kid who starts a community project to help their neighborhood. No magic, just real-world possibilities. Then there's this fairy tale. Can you think of any fairy tales? Fairy tales are usually shorter stories with magical elements, memorable characters, conflicts between good and evil, and usually a lesson to learn. This one has a daring quest, a mischievous sorceress, and an enchanted garden. And check this out, a fantasy novel. What do you think of when you hear the word fantasy? Fantasy creates entire worlds filled with magical creatures, incredible settings, and their own unique rules. This one is about a girl who finds an enchanted orchard right in her own bedroom closet. The same characters, settings, or even objects can show up totally differently depending on the genre. Take something like a shiny golden key, for example. Let's pause for a moment and think. What might this key unlock in a realistic fiction story? What about in a fairy tale or fantasy? Take a second to make your predictions. Got them? Great! Let's see how close you were. Here's part of the realistic fiction story. Maya slipped the golden key into the old lock on the community center's tool shed. It clicked open, revealing shelves lined with paint cans, brushes, and gardening tools. She grinned. Everything they'd need for Saturday's park cleanup was here. She couldn't wait to see the playground sparkling with fresh colors. See how the key is part of a realistic story? A story that could totally happen. It's used to solve a real-world problem, like opening a shed to gather tools for a community project. Nothing magical, just everyday life. Now let's see how the key might appear in a fairy tale. The young farmer clutched the golden key as he and the princess reached the towering castle gate. With trembling hands, he fit the key into the lock. The gate groaned as it opened, revealing a dazzling garden. But at the garden's heart stood a sorceress, cloaked in shadows, her staff glowing faintly as she whispered, "Every treasure has its price." Ooh, this is what makes a fairy tale so special. The golden key is part of a conflict between good and evil in a story that will use memorable characters to teach a lesson. All right, let's look at the fantasy story. Lila held the gold key tightly as she stood in front of the door. With a quiet click of the key, the door creaked yanked open to reveal a breathtaking world. Trees sparkled with stars instead of leaves, their light dancing across the ground like fireflies. Lila stepped through, her eyes wide with wonder. Oh, wow! Do you see how the key is part of something extraordinary? Fantasy stories are all about imagination. They create whole new worlds with their own unique rules, creatures, and adventures. Sometimes the magic and adventures we find in fantasies can make them seem similar to fairy tales, but fantasies are much more complex. A key here doesn't just open a door, it unlocks an entirely new place to explore. Were your predictions similar to how the golden key was used in each genre? It's so interesting how the same object can take on completely different roles depending on the type of story it's in. With so many differences between genres, it's really helpful that libraries and bookstores are organized by genre so we can find what we're looking for. But what happens if you come across a book that isn't clearly labeled? How do you figure out what kind of story it is? Let's practice spotting genre clues so you'll always know how to pick the right book for you. Start with the cover. Does it have a magical forest, a spaceship, maybe a kid riding a bike? Does the title provide any clues? The cover can offer some hints as to the kind of story inside. You can also read the blurb on the back. The description of what the story is about can clue you into the kind of story you'll be reading. Finally, read the first page. The way the story starts can give you hints about its genre. Alright, so I've been wanting to pick a book for my book club, and I just found Peter Pan. Let's check out the different features of the book. Based on what you notice on the cover, the blurb, and the first page, write down what kind of book you think this is. I'm thinking this book is a fantasy. The cover has a boy flying over London, and the blurb mentions Neverland, a magical island where kids never grow up. The first page starts with a magical line, "All children grow up, except one." I can't wait to dive into this fantasy. Let me text my book club and tell them. Hey, thanks for all your help today. We did a great job identifying different genres. Oh, wait, Jenna, one of my book club friends, just sent me a message. Another fairy tale, we just read one. I get why she might think Peter Pan is a fairy tale. I mean, it does have magic and adventure, just like fairy tales often do. But we just decided Peter Pan is actually a fantasy, right? Let's figure out how to explain this to her. When I write back to Jenna, I want to help her see the difference between fairy tales and fantasy. Pause here to write down your ideas. Then we'll craft a reply. Here's what I came up with. Hi, Jenna. I get why you thought Peter Pan was a fairy tale. It does have magic and adventure. But it's actually a fantasy because it creates its own magical world, Neverland, with its own rules and characters, like Peter, who can fly, and Tinkerbell, a fairy with her own personality. Fairy tales are usually shorter and simpler, while fantasies build entire worlds to explore. All right. Hopefully Jenna and the rest of the book club get as excited about our pick as I am. So, what have we learned today? Genres are different categories of stories that share things in common, and today we focused on two magical genres, fairy tales and fantasy. Can you think of one way they're similar and one way they're different? I bet you can't. These stories both have magic, but they use it in different ways. Fairy tales are like bite-sized adventures, often with familiar character types and clear lessons. Fantasies, on the other hand, create whole worlds that you can get lost in. As you explore your book club toolkit, or whenever you pick up a new story, pay attention to the clues that might hint at its genre. Is it a fairy tale, fantasy, or maybe realistic fiction? Keep those detective skills sharp as you read and work on your goals. Happy reading, everyone! Hey, hey.